Mom, you left the stove on again. We're going to have to talk about your living situation. The words came from my son-in-law, Mark. He stood in my kitchen doorway, his arms crossed. The smell of my Sunday roast chicken, the one I had just pulled from the oven, filled the room. My daughter, Sarah, stood behind him, her face a mask of concern. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I hadn't used the stove all day. Not once. The chicken was cooked perfectly in the oven, and the mashed potatoes were warming in the slow cooker. I looked at the dials on the stovetop. All of them were off. Mark, I didn't, I started to say, but he just shook his head slowly, a sad little smile on his face. He didn't look at the stove. He looked at Sarah, and Sarah looked at me, her eyes full of pity. That look hurt more than his lie. The lie just hung there in the air, right next to the scent of rosemary and thyme. The next day, Mark was back. He said he was just dropping off some mail he'd picked up for me. He walked into the kitchen like he owned it, the linoleum squeaking under his expensive shoes. "Looking for these, Eleanor?" he asked. He held up my car keys, dangling them from his finger. He pulled them out of the refrigerator, right from behind the milk carton. My heart did a funny little jump. My keys belong on the hook by the door. They have always been on the hook by the door. I put them there myself last night. I could feel the memory, the cool metal in my hand. "Sarah and I were talking," he said, his voice smooth as butter. "I think it's best if I drive you to your doctor's appointment on Wednesday." My daughter, who had come in behind him, nodded. "We're just worried, Mom. That's all." She touched my arm, and her skin was soft, but the touch felt like a cage. They weren't asking me. They were telling me. At the grocery store, Mark pushed the cart. He insisted. I held my shopping list, the paper worn soft in my hands, but he kept peering over my shoulder. "Are you sure you need the big can of coffee, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice a little too loud. "That's a lot of caffeine. Maybe the decaf is better." Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down was in the same aisle. I saw her pause by the cereal and pretend to read a box. Then Mark took the list from my hand. "Let's get you some nice healthy soups," he said, steering the cart away from the bakery, where I always got a single bear claw for a treat. He filled it with low-sodium broth and bland crackers. I felt like a child being told what to eat. As we checked out, I saw my best friend, Carol, watching from the end of the aisle. She had a bag of birdseed in her cart. Her eyes met mine, and she gave me a small, questioning look. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. "Eleanor?" Carol said, without even a hello. "Are you all right?" I tried to explain it to Sarah over the phone that evening. The hum of the refrigerator was the only other sound in my quiet house. "He's making things up," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "He put my keys in the refrigerator, Sarah. I know he did." There was a long pause on her end. I could hear the television murmuring in her background. "Oh, Mom," she finally said, and her voice was full of tired patience. "Mark's a financial planner. He's trained to see risks. He just wants to make sure you're safe." "This isn't about risk," I said. "This is about respect." "It's the same thing," she replied. "We love you." The conversation was a dead end. She had already picked a side, and it wasn't mine. A few days later, the mail came. Tucked between my Social Security statement and a catalogue for garden gnomes was a thick, glossy brochure. The picture on the front showed a beautiful brick building with smiling, white-haired people playing cards on a sunny patio. "Golden Meadows," the cursive letters read. "Deluxe assisted living for a life of ease." It was addressed to me, but I hadn't requested it. I ran my thumb over the slick paper. The people in the photos didn't look like real people. They looked like actors. That night, Mark called to ask about my doctor's appointment. Just before hanging up, he said, "Oh, by the way, a client of mine's mother just moved into a place called Golden Meadows. He says the grounds there are just lovely." He didn't need to say anything else. I knew he had sent it. This wasn't just a worry anymore. This was a plan. Mark came over on Tuesday, saying he was in the neighborhood. He sat down at my little desk in the corner of the living room, the one where I pay my bills. The afternoon sun made dust motes dance in the air. He clicked my mouse, and my online banking page filled the screen. "I just want to take a quick look, Eleanor. Make sure everything is running smoothly for you." His voice was so reasonable. He pointed a finger at the screen. "See? A little late fee on the credit card from last month. Just $14, but still." I squinted. He was right. I'd missed it. A hot flush of embarrassment crept up my neck. "It's easy to miss these things," he said, his tone soft and patronizing. "Let me help you set up autopay. It would be one less thing for you to worry about." He smiled his financial planner smile. "I'll just need your password to get it all set up for you." I looked at his outstretched hand, then back at the screen. The cursor blinked, waiting, and for the first time, a tiny, cold alarm bell rang in the back of my mind. "No," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "I can handle it myself." His smile tightened just a little at the edges. The next morning was the church coffee hour. The basement smelled of weak coffee and lemon pound cake. I was stirring a packet of sugar into my styrofoam cup when Mary Beth cornered me by the donation basket. She put her hand on my arm, her rings cool against my skin. "Eleanor, dear, are you feeling all right?" she asked, her eyes full of a terrible, practiced sympathy. "I'm fine, Mary Beth. Why do you ask?" She lowered her voice, leaning in so I could smell her violet-scented perfume. "It's just, well, my Frank was talking to your Mark the other day. Mark mentioned you've been having some memory episodes." Her words hung in the air between us, thicker than the humidity. I saw a few other women glance our way. The gossip had started. It was like watching someone plant weeds in my own garden. When I got home, the house felt different, unsettled. I wanted to prune the deadheads off my prize roses, the ones my late George had planted for me. I went to the kitchen drawer, the one right next to the sink where I have kept my garden shears for 30 years. They weren't there. My heart did a funny little skip. I checked the other drawers, my hands starting to feel clumsy. I finally found them in the junk drawer, underneath a book of old stamps and a tangle of rubber bands. It was a small thing, a nothing thing. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had not put them there. He was moving things, just little things, to make me doubt myself. Mark and Sarah came for dinner that Sunday. After we ate, while Sarah was clearing the plates, Mark sat next to me on the sofa. The television was on low, some game show host laughing too loudly. He put his hand on my shoulder. "Eleanor," he began, his voice full of fake concern. "We need to talk about setting up a power of attorney." He said it was just a precaution, a simple piece of paper in case something happened. He called it a loving, responsible act, a way to protect me. He made it sound like buying life insurance. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The weight of his hand felt like a stone on my shoulder. Later that night, the phone rang. It was Sarah. She was crying. "Mum, I'm so scared for you," she sobbed. "Mark and we just worry so much. I think the POA is a good idea. Please, just do it for me." For my nephew Michael's birthday, I'd sent a card with a crisp $20 bill inside, a week early, just like I always do. On Saturday, we had our weekly family video call. Michael's smiling face popped up on my computer screen, a little grainy. "Happy belated birthday, sweetie," I said. Before he could answer, Mark leaned into the camera from his side. "Oh, Mom, your memory is playing tricks on you again. His birthday was last week." I saw the flicker of confusion on Michael's face. "Aunt Eleanor, I got your card. Thank you so much." Mark just laughed, a smooth, easy sound. "She probably forgot she sent it. Don't you worry, buddy. We're looking after her." He was cutting the strings, one by one, that connected me to the rest of my family, leaving me alone on an island with him and my daughter. And my daughter just watched him do it. The next morning, I drove to the bank. The air inside was cool and smelled of clean paper. I didn't use the drive-through. I needed to look the teller in the eye. A nice young woman named Brenda helped me. She pulled up my accounts on her screen. "Everything looks fine, Eleanor," she said with a bright smile. "Your Social Security just deposited." "Could you check for any pending transactions?" I asked, my voice steady. "Any large transfers?" Her fingers tapped on the keyboard. The smile on her face faded. "Well, that's odd. There's a transfer scheduled for tomorrow. $5,000. It's going to a joint account under the names Mark and Sarah Peterson." My heart felt like a cold stone in my chest. "I did not authorize that," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Are you sure?" she asked gently. "It was set up online." "I am positive," I said. "Cancel it. Immediately." I watched her hands fly across the keyboard, cancelling my own ruin. He must have seen me type my password that day he helped me. He was just waiting. Back home, my hands were still shaking. I knew I couldn't prove anything yet. I was just a forgetful old woman. His word against mine. I thought about what he was doing. He wasn't just moving things around to confuse me. He was building a case, brick by brick. And I needed to build one of my own. I went to the electronics store that afternoon. The noise and bright lights gave me a headache. A young man asked if I needed help. "I need a voice recorder," I told him. "A very simple one, for my memoirs." He showed me a little silver device, smaller than my palm. It had one big red button. "You just press this to start and stop," he explained. "It's very popular." I bought it, along with a pack of batteries. At home, I sat at my kitchen table and practiced. I slipped it into my apron pocket, pressed the button through the fabric. A tiny red light blinked once, then went dark. It was perfect. It felt like a secret weapon, hidden next to a pack of tissues and a stray cough drop. The next day, I sat in my favorite armchair, the one George always used to sit in. The worn floral fabric felt comforting. I looked at the phone for a long time before I picked it up. I found the number in my old address book, the one with the cracked leather cover. The ink was faded, but the name was clear. Mr. Davies, my late husband's lawyer. His secretary put me right through. "Eleanor, how lovely to hear from you," he said. His voice was just as I remembered, calm and kind. "I'd like to come in, Mr. Davies," I said. "I think it's time I updated my will." "Of course," he said. "How is next Tuesday at 10? We made the appointment. I wrote it on my calendar in pencil. When I hung up, I felt a flicker of strength. I had a plan. I wasn't just waiting for the next thing to happen. I had spent my whole life making a home. I wasn't about to let him turn it into a cage. I left his business card on the little table by the door. I didn't hide it. Sure enough, when Mark stopped by that evening to drop off my mail, he saw it. His eyes narrowed. "Mr. Davies?" he asked, picking up the card. Why are you meeting with a lawyer? I looked up from my knitting, my face as placid as a summer pond. Oh, that, I said, with a little wave of my hand. I was thinking of adding a small bequest to the church's building fund. I wanted to make sure it was all done properly. I didn't like the person I was becoming, the woman who could lie so easily, but I liked the alternative even less. He watched me for a moment, searching my face. Then he smiled, that familiar, condescending smile. That's very generous of you, Eleanor. A wonderful idea. He put the card down. He believed me. I realized then that his whole plan depended on one thing, him being smart and me being stupid. He couldn't imagine I was capable of having a thought he hadn't put in my head, and that was a mistake he was going to regret. The next week, Mark called. That leaky faucet under your kitchen sink is acting up again, Eleanor, he said. It wasn't, but I knew what this was. Another reason to be in my house, to be helpful, to poke around. I can pop over this afternoon and take a look. That would be lovely, dear, I said. Before he arrived, I took out my little recorder. I pressed the red button and tucked it deep inside the wicker sewing basket on the end table in the living room, hidden beneath scraps of fabric and balls of yarn. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard his car in the driveway. He let himself in with the key I was now too afraid to ask for. Don't get up, he called out cheerfully. I heard him go into the kitchen, the sound of the pipes groaning. A few minutes later, his phone rang. I heard his footsteps as he walked into the living room for better reception, right next to the sewing basket. Hey, man, he said, his voice low and relaxed. He thought I was in the back bedroom, taking a nap. That night, I sat in my favorite armchair, the one with the worn floral pattern. The house was silent, except for the hum of the old refrigerator. I plugged a pair of small earbuds into the digital recorder and pressed the tiny play button. First, there was just static, the sound of the recorder being moved. Then I heard Mark's voice, clear as a bell. He was on the phone. Yeah, I'm over at Eleanor's, he said. A pause. Then he laughed, a low, ugly sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. No, she's in the garden. The old bat is easier to convince than I thought. A few more senior moments, and her nest egg is mine to manage. His friend on the other end must have said something, because Mark laughed again. Exactly. Full control. It's for her own good, you know. I sat there in the dark, the plastic earbuds feeling cold in my ears. The words echoed in the silence of my mind. My whole body felt like ice. He didn't want to protect my nest egg. He wanted the nest. I pressed stop, then rewind, then play. I listened to it 3 more times, until every cruel syllable was burned into my memory. The recording was perfect. I finally had the proof. The next morning, I put on my good navy blue dress and drove to Mr. Davies's office downtown. His office still smelled the same as it had for 30 years. Old books, leather, and faint pipe tobacco from when he used to smoke. He was my late husband's lawyer, a man with kind eyes and a sharp mind. He poured me a small cup of coffee in a thin china cup. Eleanor, he said, his voice gentle. You said on the phone you wanted to discuss your will. That's part of it, Arthur, I said, my hands steady around the warm cup. I looked him right in the eye. I believe my son-in-law, Mark, is attempting to steal my money by convincing my daughter and everyone else that I am mentally incompetent. I didn't raise my voice. I just stated the facts, one after the other. The stove, the keys in the refrigerator, the gossip at church. Mr. Davies listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with focus. When I was finished, he nodded slowly. This is a serious accusation, Eleanor. It is a serious situation, I replied. He told me the first steps we needed to take, a quiet plan to protect everything. He never once asked if I was sure about what I was saying. My first stop after leaving the lawyer's office was the bank. Not my usual branch, but one across town where nobody knew me. I sat with a nice young woman named Brenda, who had a picture of her golden retriever on her desk. I explained that I had concerns about financial security and wanted to open new accounts. Of course, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. We can do that right away. I moved my Social Security direct deposit. I transferred the bulk of my savings, leaving only a small amount in the old account for household bills. Brenda helped me put a fraud alert on my name and Social Security number. This means you'll get a phone call to personally verify any unusual activity or new credit applications, she explained. I walked out into the sunshine, clutching the folder with my new account information. The sun felt warm on my face. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. A few days later, Mark came over. I made sure to leave my Medicare explanation of benefits on the coffee table, a confusing jumble of codes and charges. I was sitting there with a pen, sighing, when he walked in. The smell of his cologne, the one I now hated, filled the room. "Having some trouble, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice thick with fake concern. "Oh, Mark," I said, looking up at him with what I hoped was the right amount of confusion. "It's all so complicated. I can't make heads or tails of it." He picked up the papers, a smug little smile playing on his lips. He sat beside me on the couch, a little too close. "See? This is what I'm talking about. It's a lot to handle." He patted my hand. "Don't you worry. We'll get all your paperwork sorted out soon. Thanksgiving was next week," he said. It would be at his house. That would be the perfect time for us to sit down in his office and go through everything. The next day, I told Sarah I needed to buy a new speaker for my audiobooks. "The one on my tablet is so tinny, dear," I said over the phone. She thought it was a wonderful idea. I went to the big electronics store at the mall, the music so loud it made my teeth ache. A young man with blue hair helped me pick out a small black Bluetooth speaker. It was simple, with just a few buttons. "This one has great sound quality," he said, "and it's really easy to connect to your phone." I brought it home and sat at my kitchen table with the little instruction booklet. I practiced for an hour. I paired my phone with the speaker. I turned the volume up and down. I walked into the living room, leaving the speaker on the table, and pressed play from my phone. The sound was crisp and clear. I turned it off, a small, satisfied smile on my face. The little blue light on the speaker blinked, patient and ready. I sat across the polished mahogany desk from Mr. Davies. The air in his office smelled of old paper and lemon furniture polish. He slid the freshly printed pages toward me. The paper was thick and felt important in my hands. "This new will is ironclad, Eleanor," he said, his voice a low rumble. "And the clause about financial abuse is very specific." I nodded, reading the words. They felt like a shield. I picked up his heavy fountain pen to sign the new power of attorney. It named my friend Carol, not my daughter. That part stung, but it was necessary. "Carol knows?" Mr. Davies asked gently. "She knows I trust her," I said. "That's all she needs to know for now." I signed my name, the ink a dark, final blue on the page. It felt like I was signing my own Declaration of Independence. The day before Thanksgiving was grey and cold. I sat at my little kitchen table with a cup of hot tea, the steam warming my face. My laptop hummed softly. I followed the instructions from the pamphlet, dragging the small audio file into an email to myself. I sent it. Then I did it again, sending it to Carol's email for safekeeping. Finally, I copied the file onto a tiny USB drive, the kind that fits on a keychain. I tucked it into the zippered pocket of my purse. A copy for me, a copy for a friend, and a copy for the cloud. My phone rang, startling me. It was Sarah. "Mom, are you excited for tomorrow?" she chirped. Her voice was too bright. "Of course, dear," I said, my own voice steady. "Mark is so excited for you to come. He's even set up a little office for you two in the den to go over your finances after dinner. Isn't that thoughtful?" My stomach tightened, but I kept my tone light. "Very thoughtful," I said. I walked up the stone path to their front door, balancing a pumpkin pie in my hands. The pie was still warm, its cinnamon scent mixing with the crisp autumn air. My purse felt heavy on my shoulder, not from weight, but from the secrets it held. Inside, tucked next to my wallet, was the small Bluetooth speaker. Mark opened the door with a wide, false smile. "Eleanor, you made it. Here, let me take that pie." He took the dish from me, his fingers brushing mine. He leaned in close. "Ready for our little chat after dinner, Eleanor?" he murmured, his breath smelling of coffee. I gave him my sweetest, grandmotherly smile. "I'm looking forward to it, Mark," I said. And I truly was. The dining room was filled with the sounds of a family holiday. The clink of silverware against my daughter's best china, the low murmur of conversation, the laughter of my nephew, Tom. Mark sat at the head of the table, playing the part of the generous host. "Mum, are you sure you don't want another helping of sweet potatoes?" he asked loudly. "Sometimes you forget how much you like them." I just smiled. "I'm fine, dear. Thank you." Later, when Sarah's aunt asked me about my garden club, Mark cut in. "Oh, Eleanor's been a little scattered to keep up with all that lately. We're trying to help her simplify." Each comment was a tiny paper cut. I felt my daughter's worried eyes on me, but I didn't react. I just ate my turkey and sipped my water, a perfect picture of a quiet old woman at a family dinner. After the main course, while the plates were being cleared, Mark stood up. He tapped his fork against his water glass, a sharp, demanding sound that cut through the chatter. The room fell silent. He cleared his throat, a self-important little noise. "If I could have everyone's attention," he began, placing his hands on the table and leaning forward. "As some of you know, Sarah and I have been worried about Eleanor's health and memory lately." He was starting his performance. The concerned son-in-law. My daughter looked down at her lap, her hands twisting her napkin. This was it. I placed my own fork down gently. "Mark, dear," I said, my voice clear and calm. It carried across the silent table. "Before you continue, I have a little something I'd like to share." I took the small speaker out of my purse and set it right in the middle of the table, next to the gravy boat. The polished wood was cool underneath it. The whole room had gone quiet, watching me. "It's a recording of my memoirs," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "I've been working on them. There's one passage I think you'll all find very interesting." Mark's face, which had been so full of fake concern, froze solid. His fork was halfway to his mouth. He didn't move. He just stared at that little black box on the table like it was a snake. My hands didn't shake as I tapped the screen of my phone. A little blue light on the speaker blinked once. Then, his voice filled the dining room. It was Mark's voice, lazy and confident, the way he sounded when he thought no one important was listening. The old bat is easier to convince than I thought, his recorded voice said, echoing off the crystal glasses. A few more senior moments, and her nest egg is mine to manage. The recording went on. Every cruel word, every smug laugh he had shared with his friend bounced around the silent room. I watched my daughter Sarah's face. It went from confused to pale to a mask of pure, horrified understanding. The air grew thick and heavy, smelling of cooling turkey and betrayal. When the recording finished, the silence was louder than the words had been. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Mark's face was a blotchy, ugly red. That's fake," he sputtered, pushing his chair back. "She's edited it. You know how her memory is. She's confused." No one looked at him. My nephew, a good boy, just stared down at his plate, his jaw tight with contempt. Sarah's aunt and uncle were looking anywhere but at Mark. The lie was too big, and the truth was too clear. I stood up slowly and pushed my chair neatly under the table. The fabric of my good dress rustled. I looked directly at Mark, but I didn't raise my voice. "I will not be needing your help with my finances, Mark," I said, each word clear and calm. Then I turned to my daughter. Her eyes were wide with tears. "Sarah, I love you," I told her gently. "We will talk later, when he is not here." I picked up my purse and my empty pumpkin pie dish from the sideboard. As I turned to leave, a terrible, broken sob finally escaped from Sarah. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her husband. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. The front door clicked shut behind me. A solid, final sound. The cold November air felt wonderful on my face. It was clean and sharp and real. I looked up at the sky, full of pinprick stars, and took a deep breath. My car was parked at the curb, right under a streetlight. Before I even found my keys in my purse, my phone started to buzz. I pulled it out. The screen glowed with Sarah's name. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I silenced the call and put the phone away. Not tonight. The first thing I did the next morning was call a locksmith. The sound of the drill was loud in the quiet house, but it was a good sound. It was the sound of a door closing for good. He handed me 2 new, shiny keys. They felt heavy and solid in my palm. That afternoon, I drove to the post office. I didn't send the letter myself. I paid the extra money to have it certified, with a signature required. The envelope, addressed to both Sarah and Mark, contained a single sheet of paper. It was a formal notice, drafted by Mr. Davies. It said Mark was not to contact me. It said he was not to set foot on my property. It was cold and legal and left no room for argument. Driving home, the setting sun was in my eyes, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could see clearly. I wondered how long it would take for the letter to arrive. It took less than 24 hours. My doorbell rang the next afternoon. It was Sarah, standing alone on my porch. Her face was pale and blotchy, her eyes red from crying. The air smelled of damp earth from the overnight rain. "Mum," she whispered, "I got the letter?" I didn't invite her in. I just stood there, my hand on the doorknob. "I'm sorry it had to be that way, Sarah." "Sorry?" Her voice cracked. "You blew up the family, Mum, at Thanksgiving. How could you do that to us?" A cold calm settled over me. I looked at my daughter, this woman I loved more than life itself, and I saw the strings Mark had attached to her. "He loaded the bomb, Sarah," I said, my voice even and quiet. "I just lit the fuse." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. "I love you," I told her. "But you need to decide what kind of life you want to live. and who you want to live it with. I won't wait forever for your answer. I spent the next week in near perfect silence. I didn't answer the phone, which rang several times a day. I let the calls go to the machine, and I never listened to the messages. Instead, I put on my old gardening gloves and went to work on my roses. The feel of the rich soil under my fingernails was grounding. The sharp, clean snip of the shears cutting away dead branches felt right. In the afternoons, I'd make a pot of Earl Grey tea. The steam warmed my face as I sat in my favourite armchair, a book open on my lap. The house was quiet. The only sounds were the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. It wasn't a lonely silence. It was a peaceful one. It was the sound of my own life, reclaimed. I started to wonder what I might do with all this quiet time. On Friday, my best friend Carol came over. She didn't use the doorbell, just called out from the back patio like she always did. Her cheerful voice was a welcome sound. She was holding a bottle of chilled white wine. "I heard through the grapevine there was an earthquake at the family dinner," she said, giving me a hug that felt like coming home. "Figured we should celebrate your Independence Day." We sat at my kitchen table while I told her everything. Later, I pulled out the papers Mr. Davies had prepared. We signed the new power of attorney documents, with Carol as my agent. Her signature was firm and clear next to mine. She poured us each a glass of wine. The clink of our glasses echoed in the quiet kitchen. We laughed then, a real, deep laugh that had been missing from my life for far too long. The email from Mark arrived on a Sunday morning. His name in my inbox made my stomach clench. It was a long, rambling message, full of excuses. He said the recording was a misunderstanding. He said I was confused. He blamed Sarah for not managing my care properly. He blamed me for being ungrateful. It was a whole page of poison. I didn't reply. I didn't even finish reading it. I just clicked forward, typed in Mr. Davies's email address, and hit send. Then I moved the message to the trash folder and emptied it. The feeling of deleting his words was more satisfying than a slice of my best lemon meringue pie. 2 hours later, my doorbell rang. It was a delivery man, holding a vase so full of white lilies and roses it was almost ridiculous. The scent filled my entryway. The card was small and white. Tucked inside was a note from Sarah, written in her familiar looping script. It had only 5 words. "I'm so sorry. I'm listening." I waited a day before I called her back. I let the flowers sit on my counter, their sweet smell filling the kitchen. When I picked up the phone, my hand was steady. "Sarah," I said, "let's get some coffee." We met at the Daily Grind, a noisy little place downtown. I got there first and chose a small table by the window. The clatter of ceramic mugs and the hum of the espresso machine felt like a shield. When she walked in, she looked tired. Her eyes were puffy. "Mum," she said, sitting down. She didn't touch the cup of coffee I'd bought for her. "I'm staying with Brenda. I left him." I just nodded and took a sip of my tea. The warmth of the mug felt good in my hands. "For now?" I asked. "I don't know," she whispered, looking down at the table. "He just kept saying you tricked him, that you manipulated everyone." She finally looked at me. "But I heard the recording, Mom. I heard his voice." The conversation was like walking on broken glass. Every word was careful. It was painful. But it was real. It was the first real talk we'd had in years. When we left, she gave me a quick, clumsy hug. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. Carol called me the next morning. "There's a walking club that meets at the park," she said. "Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Put on your sneakers, Eleanor. You're coming. I didn't want to go, but I went. The air was crisp and smelled of damp earth and pine needles. There were about 10 of us, mostly women I knew from church or the grocery store. We walked the paved loop, our sneakers crunching softly on the gravel path. Eleanor, it's so good to see you out, one of them, Betty, said. We'd missed you at the potlucks. I realized I hadn't been to a potluck in almost a year. Mark had always said the noise and crowds were too much for me. It wasn't true. He had just been shrinking my world, one little excuse at a time. By the end of the walk, my legs were tired, but my head felt clearer than it had in a long, long time. A week later, a thick envelope arrived for me. It was from Mr. Davies's office. Inside was a copy of a legal notice. Mark was filing for divorce from Sarah. I sat down in my armchair, the stiff paper crinkling in my hand. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was a line in the filing. He was trying to claim a portion of Sarah's future assets, including her expected inheritance. I called Mr. Davies right away. The hum of the air conditioner kicked on while the phone rang. "Mr. Davies?" I said. "It's Eleanor. Did you see this?" I heard him chuckle on the other end of the line. It wasn't a mean sound, just a dry, professional one. "I saw it, Eleanor," he said. "It's a desperate move. Don't you worry about it for a second. Let him try." His calm voice settled the knot in my stomach. Mark wasn't just losing control of me. He was losing control of everything. Mr. Davies's words gave me an idea. The next day I was back in his office. The leather on his visitor chairs still smelled the same. "I want to set up a living trust," I told him. "I want to make sure my assets are protected for Sarah, no matter what happens." He nodded, pulling out a yellow legal pad. "A wise decision," he said. "And I want a special clause in it," I continued, my voice firm. "I want it stated, very clearly, that Mark can never be a beneficiary. Not directly, not indirectly, not even if he and Sarah get back together." We spent an hour working out the details. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders with every signature. That evening, Sarah called me. Her voice was thin and shaky. "Mum," she said, "I just checked the bank. Our joint savings account. It's almost empty. Mark took almost all of it." I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't get angry. I just took a slow breath. The smell of the chicken I was roasting for my dinner filled the kitchen. "Okay, Sarah," I said calmly. "The first thing we do is get you a good lawyer. Someone who only works for you." She started to cry. "I can't afford it, Mom. He took everything." "I know," I said. "I'll take care of the retainer. This is not a loan. This is help." I found the name of a sharp female lawyer Mr. Davies had once mentioned. The next day, I went to her office myself. I wrote a check directly to the firm, not to Sarah. It was an act of support, not control. I was giving her a tool, not a handout. I wanted her to feel her own strength, not my power. I started volunteering at the local library on Tuesdays. The children's section smelled of old paper and that lemon-scented floor wax they've used for 50 years. I'd sit in a low, comfortable armchair, a stack of picture books beside me, and the children would gather on a colourful rug at my feet. The little ones were always my favourite. My old teaching skills came right back. I knew how to make my voice big and booming for the giant and small and squeaky for the mouse. One little girl with bright red pigtails asked me, "Do you have a giant at your house?" I smiled at her. "No, dear, no giants. It's very quiet." The head librarian, a kind woman named Brenda, gave me a cup of tea afterwards. "You're a natural, Eleanor," she said. "The kids adore you." Holding the warm ceramic mug, I felt a deep sense of peace. Mark had wanted to put me in a place where I would be managed and watched. Instead, I was here, needed and useful. I wondered if he could even imagine a happiness this simple. My nephew, David, called me that next weekend. He was my sister's boy, a good kid with a steady job in computers. The sound of his voice was warm and familiar over the phone. I was in the kitchen, watching a fat robin peck for worms in the yard. "Aunt Eleanor, I just wanted to call and see how you were," he said. There was a pause. "And to tell you, the whole family knows what happened, what Mark tried to do." I held the phone a little tighter. "Oh?" "Yeah," he said, and I could hear the anger in his voice. "Nobody blames you. We're all on your side. He's a real piece of work." I felt a knot in my chest loosen. I hadn't realized how tight it had been. We talked for a while longer about his job and his new girlfriend. It was a normal conversation, the kind of conversation Mark had tried to steal from me. After we hung up, I stood by the window for a long time, just watching that little bird. The isolation had been the cruelest part of Mark's plan. It took 2 months, but I sold my big family house. Walking through the empty rooms on the final day was strange. I could hear the echo of my own footsteps on the hardwood floors where my children had learned to walk. It held too many memories, and some of them were now stained by Mark's scheming. It was time to let it go. I bought a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in a 55-plus community called Willow Creek. It was all on one level, with a small patio perfect for a rose garden. The day I signed the papers, the HOA president introduced herself. She was a tall woman with a stiff perm and a name tag that read Mildred Gable. "Welcome to the community, Eleanor," she said, her eyes scanning my simple pantsuit. "I trust you've read the bylaws. Section C, paragraph 4, strictly prohibits all lawn ornaments, including gnomes and flamingos." "I'll be sure to keep my flamingos under control," I said with a straight face. She didn't crack a smile. I had a feeling Mrs. Gable and I were going to get to know each other very well. Sarah helped me move into the new condo. We spent the day surrounded by cardboard boxes that smelled faintly of dust and newsprint. It was hard work, but we fell into an easy rhythm. She would lift the heavy things, and I would direct traffic and unpack the kitchen. By evening, we were exhausted. We sat on the floor of the living room, leaning against the wall, and ate pizza straight from the box. The whole place smelled of pepperoni and fresh paint. "This place already feels like you, Mom," Sarah said, picking a mushroom off her slice. "It's bright." I looked around at my familiar armchair sitting in its new spot by the window. "It's a new beginning for me," I told her. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Her touch was hesitant, but it was there. We were still rebuilding, one cardboard box and one shared pizza at a time. A few days after I'd mostly unpacked, a letter arrived with the church's return address on it. The envelope was thick, expensive paper. I sat down at my new little kitchen table with a cup of coffee and opened it. The handwriting was neat and looping, the kind they don't teach anymore. It was from Mary, the woman from the coffee morning who had asked if I was all right. Her note was short. She wrote that she was sorry for gossiping, for listening to Mark's stories without question. "I should have come to you directly as a friend," she wrote. "Please forgive an old woman's foolishness." I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. The apology was a balm on a wound I didn't know was still so tender. I took out a note card and wrote back, "Thank you for your note. All is forgiven." I sealed it and placed it by my purse to mail. It felt good to close that little door. But I did wonder how many other people had heard Mark's whispers and never thought to ask me for the truth. I decided my little condo needed a proper welcome. I invited Carol, Sarah, and a few ladies from my new walking club over for a small housewarming. I baked a lemon bundt cake, and the sweet, citrusy smell filled my small kitchen. My new home wasn't big, but it was full of warmth and chatter. The sound of real laughter bounced off the walls. Sarah sat on the arm of my new sofa, a real smile on her face. She looked lighter than she had in years. Carol was telling a funny story about her grandson, and everyone was listening. "Eleanor, this place is just perfect for you," Carol said, patting my hand. Her hand was warm and dry. I looked around at the faces in my living room, women I had chosen to have in my life. It felt more like family than some holidays ever did. A few weeks later, I was having coffee with Carol at a little cafe downtown. The morning sun streamed through the big front window, warming the tabletop. She stirred her latte, the little spoon clinking against the ceramic mug. "Did you hear about Mark?" she asked, not looking at me. "I try not to," I said, taking a sip of my tea. "Well, his business is in trouble. Big trouble," she said. "Word gets around in a town this size. People don't want a man who would do that to his own mother-in-law managing their retirement funds." I didn't feel happy. Not exactly. I just felt a quiet sense of balance, like a crooked picture being set straight. Later that day, at the grocery store, I saw him. He was standing in the canned goods aisle, looking at soups. He looked thin and grey, and his shoulders were slumped. Our eyes met for just a second before he looked away, staring hard at a can of chicken noodle as if it held all the secrets of the universe. Sarah called me the next Tuesday, her voice bright. "It's final, Mum. The divorce is final." I could hear the relief in her words, like a heavy weight had been lifted from her chest. We met for our weekly lunch at the diner. She told me she had signed up for a night class at the community college, a course in bookkeeping. "I always liked numbers," she said, folding her paper napkin into a tiny square. "Mark used to say I wasn't clever enough for that sort of thing." She looked up at me, and her eyes were clear. He was wrong about a lot of things. I watched her talk about her professor and her homework, and I saw a flicker of the confident young woman she used to be. A piece of my daughter was coming home. The next month, I did something just for me. I bought a round-trip train ticket to the coast. I packed one small suitcase with a good book and a warm sweater. Sitting by the window, I watched the countryside slide by, a blur of green and gold. The gentle rocking of the train was hypnotic. I drank coffee from a paper cup and ate a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and I didn't have to talk to a soul. I walked along the boardwalk, the salty air sharp and clean in my lungs, the sound of the gulls crying overhead. For 3 whole days, I was not a mother, or a widow, or a victim. I was just Eleanor. It felt like breathing after being underwater for a very long time. Back home, I started tending to the small garden patio outside my condo. I bought 3 new rose bushes, a Mr. Lincoln, a peace, and a Queen Elizabeth. I was on my knees, my hands deep in the cool soil, when a sharp voice startled me. "Those pots are 2 inches too far from the wall." It was Mrs. Gable, the HOA president, a woman who walked around with a clipboard and a permanent frown. I stood up, wiping my hands on my apron. "Good morning to you too," I said. Her eyes narrowed, but then she looked past me, at my Queen Elizabeth rose. "Is that a grandiflora?" she asked, her voice a little softer. "It is," I said. "My late husband George always said it was the most reliable rose you could plant." She stepped closer, touching a petal gently. "My father grew these," she murmured. "He won a blue ribbon for one at the state fair." We stood there for a few minutes, just 2 women talking about roses. By the time she left, she had invited me to join the landscaping committee. I spent a quiet afternoon going through old photo albums, the scent of aged paper and glue filling my new living room. I was looking for pictures to frame, to make these new walls feel like mine. My fingers, a little stiff with arthritis, paused on a photograph of my late husband, George. He was standing by his old Ford, squinting in the sun, with a smile that reached his eyes. My friend Carol called while I was looking at it. "Find any good ones?" she asked, her voice cheerful through the phone. "I found a picture of George," I said, my voice a little thick. "He has that smile, the one he always had when he was proud of me." I traced the outline of his face with my fingertip. He would have been so angry at Mark, but he would have been so proud of how I handled it. Tucked behind his picture was another one. It was of Sarah, maybe 5 years old, her small hand wrapped tightly around my index finger. She was looking up at me with absolute trust. It made my heart ache, but in a good way, a healing way. For our next weekly lunch, we met at a little cafe with big windows that let the afternoon sun pour in. The air smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Sarah wasn't alone. "Mum, this is Linda," she said, gesturing to the woman beside her. "We're partners on a project for my history class." Linda had kind eyes and a firm handshake. "It's so lovely to finally meet you, Eleanor. Sarah talks about you all the time." I gave my daughter a small, knowing look. "Only good things, I hope." We all laughed. It was easy, comfortable. I watched Sarah as she talked with her new friend, seeing a lightness in her that had been gone for years. She was building a life that was hers, piece by piece. As we were gathering our purses to leave, Sarah mentioned offhand, "Linda's also divorced. Her ex was tricky with money, too." A quiet look of understanding passed between the three of us, a little club I never asked to join, but was grateful not to be in alone. The phone rang on a Tuesday morning, just as I was watering my porch ferns. It was Mr. Davies, my lawyer. The sun warmed my back as I listened to his calm, steady voice. My cat, Marmalade, wound himself around my ankles, purring like a tiny motor. "Well, Eleanor, that's the last of it," he said. "Everything is ironclad. Your living trust is filed and finalized. Your assets are protected for you and for Sarah after you." I took a deep, slow breath. "And the clause about Mark?" I had to ask one last time. "He couldn't touch a penny with a 10-foot pole," Mr. Davies said, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "It's done." I thanked him and hung up. The final piece of armor was locked in place. The war was over, and I had won. I looked around my secure little home, and the future felt wide open. A few days later, I was sorting my mail at the little table by the door. Among the bills and the flyers for the grocery store was a glossy postcard. On the front was a smiling picture of my nephew, Michael, and his lovely fiancée. It was a save the date for their wedding next spring. I picked up the phone and called him right away. "Aunt Eleanor," he answered, his voice full of warmth. "Did you get it?" "I did, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it for the world," I told him, my heart feeling full. "Good," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Because we're saving you a seat right in the front row. You're the guest of honor." Mark had tried to poison my family against me, to cut me off and leave me alone. All he had done was cut himself out. I hung up the phone and looked at my calendar to mark the date, feeling a simple, quiet joy. I sat on my new patio as the sun went down, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. A warm mug of chamomile tea was cradled in my hands, and Marmalade was a purring weight on my lap. The air was sweet with the scent of the roses I had planted, their petals soft in the fading light. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Night, Mum. Love you?" I smiled and texted back, "Love you too." I thought about Mark's voice on that recording, so full of arrogance. The old bat, he had called me. He thought he was writing the last chapter of my story, a sad tale of a confused old woman. But he was wrong. I was the only one who held the pen. I took a slow sip of my tea, closed my eyes, and breathed in the peaceful quiet of my garden. I was safe. I was respected. I was finally home.